If you look forward to 2030, 2050, we just won't be able to produce enough at that point. And that's really based on the projections of the losses that we're experiencing today.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Earthlings 2.0, the show where we imagine how we can be better versions of ourselves and build a collective future we actually want to live in. In today's episode, we're continuing our exploration of how to protect food from being wasted as it travels from farm to table. And no, we're not talking about doing something that feels unnatural, like those irradiated green apples in the grocery store scene of 28 Days Later. Ugh, oh my goodness. All that rotted fruit, and then the apples are just shiny and gleaming like they were freshly picked. It's probably one of the more pleasant scenes of that horror movie. Instead, we're going to look into something as simple as a sticker and how it could keep our precious fruits fresh twice as long, simply by mimicking what happens in nature already. And hopefully, this is going to help food that is harvested actually make it to the consumer with enough time on the freshness timeline that people can actually enjoy it. I think at some point in my life, I just stopped buying strawberries because I couldn't eat them fast enough before they went bad, and it just felt like a waste. I hate wasting food. It's a waste of money, it's a waste of resources. It really grinds my gears. And so you can see why I'm so interested in this topic. But before we ring the dinner bell on this conversation, I'm your host, Lisa Ann Pinkerton. I'm the CEO of the award winning public relations firm Technica Communications, and we are celebrating 15 years this year supporting clean tech and climate tech startups. And as well as sustainability companies to get the word out about what they do. I'm also the founder of Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability and former award winning environmental science reporter for NPR and PBS. And I want to welcome all of you new and returning listeners. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you're new, welcome. Feel free to have a look at our proverbial spaceship. We have a lot of different rooms with interesting topics to explore. So go to your podcast app and have a look. I'm sure there's some stuff you'll be interested in listening to. And if you're a returning listener, thank you too for joining us each week. We really appreciate your support. And we'd love to get to know you better. So go to our show notes and click on the listener survey. It's a short survey of just a few questions. And if you could take the time to answer those for us, we can have a better understanding of who you are, and then we can bring you content that you're looking for. We also have a Substack newsletter. So if you join that, then you'll get pinged once a month. I promise we're not going to hit you up a lot. And there'll be the latest shows and then also some binge worthy topic threads to look into. And last but not least, if you're enjoying what you hear, please consider sending your friend a link to the show, probably your favorite episode, and that's how you're going to help us grow this community. And thank you to Resource Labs for having us on the network. One problem of food loss is that sometimes it doesn't make economic sense to harvest crops, even if they're ripe and ready. Our episode Land of the Lost Food covered that with Dr. Lisa Johnson. And here she is explaining this in her own words.
So, very often, the shorthand answer for why food loss happens on farms that growers give me is that the price they're offered doesn't cover the cost to harvest the crop. There's also the risk of putting something into a box and shipping it off when it's not perfect. If that happens, the grower is often on the hook for the entire shipment and everything that went into it. So there's a lot of risk involved.
If you're curious to check out more about the risks farmers face harvesting crops and losing the economic value of those crops after they've been planted, go to our show notes and check out that episode. Or you can go to your podcast app, scroll back to episode number 22. Today, we're going to cover what happens once that food is harvested and in the supply chain, or the cold chain, as it's called in the industry, simply because we use refrigeration primarily to keep this food fresh as it travels from the farm to the table. And this is something that can be more of a challenge in global South countries. So this is not nearly as optimized as it can be. In fact, McKinsey and Company reported that it's estimated $600 billion worth of food is lost globally during or just after harvest, meaning this food is simply wasted and written off as a loss and left to rot in landfills, which then can make it a climate change challenge. And beyond this, food security is expected to be magnified by the climate crisis, which affects farmers' agricultural yields and basically would decrease the amount of food making its journey to a plate where it can be consumed. So, if we're going to have these drops in yields and presumably we're going to have a higher population, we get a chance to fix this food waste issue now before it becomes a serious problem to feeding humanity. And so that's where today's guest comes in. His name is Moody Soliman, and he is the CEO and co founder of RYP Labs, a company using biomimicry to extend the shelf life of produce. He started out his career in the biotech field, working for companies like Boston Scientific and Bayer, before parlaying those skills into the ag tech space. And we caught up with him from his office in Seattle, Washington.
To put it in perspective, every minute we waste enough food to feed over 1 million people, right? And that very same food waste will end up in landfills releasing thousands of metric tons of greenhouse gases, specifically methane, which is about 28 times as potent as a CO2. So you're really looking at an economical, social, and environmental problem that, again, is impacting every single person on the face of this planet. So once it's harvested, that's really where our technology can start to be applied and can really start to have an impact. And then you can even go further down the supply chain. So from the farm, it typically will go to a distribution center. From the distribution center, it gets shipped to the retailer. Then it sits on the shelf. And then finally, the consumer picks it up and takes it home. And so every one of those steps I just mentioned, there are significant losses that happen, whether it's right there at the farm because it's mishandled or it's not picked correctly or not picked at the right time that it's supposed to be picked, not stored correctly at the farm, to the shipment to the distribution center. And then in the distribution center storage house, there are losses there. And then once it's shipped to the retailer, and then of course at the retail shelf and the consumer. So what we've ended up developing is a formulation, a bioactive plant-based formulation that can basically be applied to almost any surface, including stickers. And that's really our flagship product, right? That's what makes our product really exciting. So we can take food-safe, food-grade stickers, just like the ones you see here. You would simply peel them. Now they're coated with our bioactive formulation, apply them to a fruit or even a package of the fruit. Because often we get asked, okay, what about strawberries? Do you have to put a sticker on every strawberry or blueberry? Unfortunately, no. You could simply apply it to the inside of the clamshell. So for example, we have here a clamshell of strawberries. This is exactly how you'd apply the sticker, just to the inside. And again, it's coated with this, what we call this bioactive plant-based natural formulation. And so I know it's a lot of jargon here, but what does that really mean? And how does it work? So if you look at plants have been producing these natural volatile compounds for millions of years to protect themselves. A really good example is lavender. Everyone's familiar with lavender. People plant it in their gardens. You see it outside. If you're walking down the street, you can smell it, and you don't necessarily have to be right there next to the plant, and you can smell it at a distance. Why is the lavender releasing that scent, right? Has many different reasons, attracting bees for pollination, etc. But one very important attribute that we have discovered over time is that these secondary metabolites actually protect the plant from invasive species. That could be pests, bacteria, fungi, because the plant is rooted to the ground. So if something comes and attacks the plant, it can't run away, right? So it developed this mechanism to defend itself by releasing these volatile compounds. So what we do at RYP Labs that's particularly unique is we can identify which of these compounds are most effective on preventing premature rotting for certain produce. And this all happens in the vapor phase. So just like the plant, the leaves of the plant release that volatile compound, our stickers will do the exact same thing. And then our material scientists and chemical engineers will develop matrices to encapsulate or trap these volatile compounds so that we could control their release rate, thus giving us this formula that we can apply to almost any surface, again, including stickers. And therefore, what we've really done is we've biomimicked how plants have been able to defend themselves for millions of years to now protect the fruit and extend its shelf life. And the last point on that that's really important to highlight is, of course, everything we use is food grade. And so it's perfectly safe to eat, including the sticker, even though we don't recommend it. But, of course, some people could forget the sticker on the fruit, throw it in a blender, you'll be perfectly fine.
Do you have different bioactive ingredients for different types of fruit and vegetables, or are there similarities between the stickers for various food products?
Yeah, great question. The short answer would be yes and no. And so what I mean by that is we don't have a silver bullet formulation that works for everything, right? But on the flip side of that, the good news is we don't need to develop a different formula for every fruit that's out there either. So, for example, we have one formula that works particularly well on strawberries, blackberries, and blueberries. But we have a different configuration and a different formula for raspberries. And then may have a different formula for mangoes. But then that formula will also work for papayas and other fruits in that family. So we try to develop formulas with the broadest applicability possible. So we don't have to tweak or make a different formula for every fruit that's out there.
And have you recognized, beyond keeping these fruits from rotting, have you been able to notice if there's a preservation of flavor that goes along with that?
Indirectly, absolutely. Yeah. So actually, it's interesting you bring this up because this is one of the things that our technology can help improve. Is, let's say, strawberries, for example, right? So strawberries are non-climacteric fruits, which basically means they don't ripen once you pick them. If you pick a strawberry and it has a certain sweetness and a certain flavor to it, it's going to maintain that level of sweetness and that flavor until it starts to degrade and get even worse, right? As opposed to, for example, bananas. Very familiar, I'm sure you're with bananas. If you leave them, then they'll get sweeter and there'll be this ideal time to eat them. Same thing with avocados. Those are climacteric fruits that ripen after picking. So for strawberries, they will pick the strawberry before it's at an ideal ripening stage, because when it's perfectly ripened and it's ready to eat, you will only have 1 or 2 days of shelf life. If you pick it up a little earlier, if you harvest it a little earlier, you're sacrificing the flavor and the quality. And so now, if we're able to maintain the life of the fruit longer, you can pick the strawberry at closer to that ideal ripening stage. So that could potentially be an indirect positive effect of applying our technology.
Yeah, I could see how people might be more apt to eat their more fruits and vegetables if they actually taste a little bit better. Because, we know that farmers have been, with, good reason, they've been selecting for certain attributes that support their economics, right? It has a longer shelf life. It grows faster, whatever the case might be, but they're not always selecting for flavor.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they're definitely sacrificing flavor for shelf life and for other factors that may come into play. And so the more that we can give them, the more flexibility we can give them in their supply chain, the more then they can focus and continue to focus on quality and flavor of the produce they're giving to the consumer. Absolutely.
So can we dig a little bit more into how these stickers work? Because you mentioned that there's this bioactive formula and it's sort of like timed release. And you said it's a plant-based formula, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So scientifically, what's really happening here?
Yeah. So really what's happening is any fruit you're consuming today will already have, like the strawberries you're eating already has the fungi the white fuzzy stuff that grows on your fruit, basically, that's already in your fruit, in most fruits, right? And it's really just in a dormant stage, and it's just waiting for the right time to grow and to proliferate. And that's when you start to see it on the fruit, right? And that can be triggered, of course, by the quality of the fruit, humidity, temperature, etc. And so all we do is we've realized that plants have already been producing these natural compounds that these type of fungi and causes for premature rotting, they don't like having these compounds around. And so by just having them in the air around the fruit, they suppress them and they prevent them from growing. They don't kill them. So it's not a pesticide or a fungicide or anything like that, but it just suppresses it so that it can maintain the freshness of the produce longer.
And it sounds like it's really simple to apply too. You can just, if you're picking berries, you can apply the sticker to the container that the berries are going in right there in the field, and it's all set and ready to go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's also not limited to just stickers, right? Stickers is just what we call a delivery vehicle. We can apply it, in a sachet format. So, for example, if you have a bigger box and you don't want to apply 5 stickers on that bigger box, you can just drop a sachet in there that could be removed and discarded afterwards. And we're looking at other applications that really, at the end of the day, Lisa-Ann, what we want to do and what really differentiates us from a lot of the solutions out there is we can tailor the solution to fit the existing supply chain with minimal disruption, right? If you're a coating solution, for example, you have to apply a coating to the entire fruit. You need probably some expensive capital equipment to be integrated into the supply chain that can coat and apply the formula or the spray or the coating on the fruit. Even a lot of solutions out there do have the sachet format, but they're only limited to sachets. And so, for example, if you're working with a clamshell of strawberries, there is really no place to drop the sachet, and there isn't very little consumers out there would want to open up a pack of strawberries with a packet inside of something. And so you simply can then use the sticker. So this flexibility of being able to introduce our technology in different formats is one of the things that really does differentiate how we can do this. And that's how we wanted to engineer it from day one.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about where you're deploying your solution commercially. Where is this being used?
Yeah, so our first customer is actually one of the largest retailers in the world in Costa Rica. They're based, they have branches in Costa Rica, and this is where our first deployment was. That was about 50,000 stickers on strawberries, and we added anywhere from 2 to 4 days to the shelf life of their strawberries. So it was quite significant, and they even took the test further, tracked consumers that took the strawberries home, and overall the feedback was with Sticks Fresh. The berries were fresher, they lasted longer at home, which was fantastic to see that the benefits extended even further. And so this was completed at the end of last year, which really set us up to now focus on commercializing the technology globally and starting to launch worldwide. So we have now pilots in Japan, Turkey, Spain, Morocco, Mexico, and in many, many other areas where we're piloting the product as a proof of concept so that we can really expand and commercialize the technology everywhere.
And are you finding more success working with the farmers or the supply chain, the distributors to implement this technology, or are you feeling the pull from the retailer to want this technology implemented within their supply chain?
Yeah, so ironically, I just mentioned our first customer was a retailer, but really the ideal customer is the distributor, only because this is where operations become most centralized and standardized. So instead of going to 100 different farmers, you can go to one distributor that's receiving the fruit from those 100 farmers, right? So if you go to the distributor and ask them to apply this technology, they can go out to their 100 farmers, ask to, supply them with the stickers. They apply them to in this case, we're talking about strawberries, to the clamshells as they're picking the strawberries. And now you've served all 100 farmers through that one distributor. And then from there, the distributor, of course, is interested in this technology because from shipment from their distribution center to the customer, that could be regional or it could be international, this is where they start to experience a lot of those premature losses that they weren't planning for. And so they'll see the benefit of the technology. And sometimes that benefit can even be extended down to the retailer.
Mm-hmm. And with climate change, we've been told that farmers would expect to have lower yields generally due to a warming climate. How do you see your technology supporting farmers and our food chain as the planet warms?
Yeah, look, if you just look at the numbers, again, strawberries in the United States, if you just look at the numbers, the USDA numbers for strawberries and the losses across the entire supply chain, about 50% of our strawberries are going to waste. Literally never make it to the plate or never consumed. And so if you just look at that alone, we are producing more than enough. And then you can extrapolate that to all food groups all over the world. In fact, if you look at the numbers, we're wasting enough food, I believe, to feed over 1.5 billion people, and about 800 million are food insecure. So we're making almost twice as much food to feed everybody. From that group.
Because we're losing so much, we have to produce so much more, right?
Yeah, exactly. So reducing these losses even by 50%, we'd have more than enough. So the yield issue, but then also it brings up the fact that our population is growing. If you look forward to 2030, 2050, we just won't be able to produce enough at that point. And that's really but the reason why we're saying we're not going to be able to produce enough is based on the projections of the losses that we're experiencing today. So if we reduce the losses, then we can sustain that growing population. At least that's what the numbers are telling us.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously, I would love to have these stickers just for my own personal use. So when is something like this going to be available to the average consumer?
Great question. I'd love for it to be available yesterday. In fact, this is when we first started, this is where we thought the technology was going to be just great. We looked at the end consumer as, no pun intended, a low-hanging fruit, right? Like every person we talked to, when we would talk about, when Steve and I would go around, talk to our friends and family about this, they would say, can I get those stickers to use at home? So we're like, well, consumers are perfect. But the challenge with consumers is that they bring in a lot more variables to the equation. So for example, let's say you and I go to the grocery store, we each pick a pack of strawberries. You're a good consumer, I'm not so much. You go home, you put your strawberries in the fridge right away, you apply a sticker to it and you put it in the fridge. But I leave my strawberries in the trunk for a couple hours. Then I take it home and I put the sticker on it, and then I put it in the fridge. And then all of a sudden my strawberries are going bad and I'm saying, oh, that sticker is not working, right? But I ignore the fact that I just left them in the trunk for 2 hours in the heat. And so that variable where we don't yet have the technology optimized to account for all these different scenarios to guarantee the outcome or the performance of our technology, but it's much easier to do with distributors. But eventually, as we further optimize the technology and we can have better control over the different knobs like the release rate, the concentration, further optimize the formula itself to be even more effective, we will be able, I believe, to reach a point where then we can give you as a consumer a pack to apply these at home. It could be, relatively soon, just depending on which fruits we want to apply this to and how we're going to reach the consumers, and also educate them on how to use the stickers and when to use them. And that's a whole different, of course, marketing and challenge when you're talking about consumers versus marketing it to business. But it's definitely something that's on our radar.
Managing the human element is always a challenge. Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Exactly.
So when you look into the future, the work that you're doing and just the supply, the food chain and food losses generally, when you look into the future, what do you expect to see in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so what we expect to see generally is a lot more of these technologies coming online. And, this is something we talk about all the time and talk about quite candidly, right? This is such a huge problem. RYP Labs is not going to solve it on its own. As you mentioned, rightly so, at the beginning of the conversation, there are many different reasons why fruit go bad. right? Um, we talked about mishandling. There's just the look of the fruit. I think the company was called Ugly Fruits or something like that. That focuses on fruits that don't look good but taste just as good. To be and that has had a big impact in of itself. But that, in addition to so many other technologies, are going to be coming online to address this problem, because it is becoming top of mind for everyone, which is really cool to be a part of that story. And for us personally at RYP Labs, we want to see that technology deployed everywhere in the world. And this is one of the unique things about this technology, and why especially our investors that are very impact-driven investors are very excited about this technology, because out of all the technologies out there, this one can truly be applied anywhere in the world, from the largest distributors down to the smallest smallholder farmers. Could be just a smallholder farmer in Malaysia or in Nigeria or in Egypt that can literally just take a sticker and apply it to their clamshell, right? They don't need any capital equipment. They don't need any extensive training or anything like that. So it's really that solution that we want to see everywhere in the world, and especially in developing countries where these smallholder farmers are, their entire livelihood is based on the yield of that season. So we're excited about that. It's what drives a lot of us, or I would say even the whole team. And so that's what we want to see here over the next 5 to 10 years.
Earthlings, if you live in Costa Rica, please be on the lookout for the Sticks Fix stickers on your produce at a major retailer in the country. And if you find one, please send us a photo on social media. We're at Earthlings Pod on all the different platforms. It's so inspiring to think that something as simple as a sticker mimicking what happens in nature already could mean the difference between wasting 50% of our strawberries or not. So keep your sensors pointed at RYP Labs to see how their solution is going to show up in a produce aisle near you. Speaking of fresh produce, our faith in humanity is restored this week by Anton Trotter and Patrice Godin. They are the co-founders of La Linea Vieja, a company dedicated to greening any and all services possible to increase public health and fight climate change. Thanks to them, IGA was the first grocery store in Canada to offer fresh produce to consumers that was grown directly on its rooftop. And we're talking organic produce as well. 30 varieties of vegetables are cultivated on the roof, like kale, lettuce, carrots, green beans, eggplant, garlic, tomatoes, spinach, and more. This project requires the dedicated efforts of 3 employees, 1 farmer working year-round and 2 seasonally. Additionally, the project provides opportunities for skill development and community involvement by engaging 6 interns and 12 volunteer workers over the summer. Also, pollinators are hard at work on the rooftop. The store installed multiple beehives on the roof, and they collect local honey straight from the source. So, as we continue to find ways to feed all the earthlings on our growing planet without melting it at the same time, we commend individuals like Anton and Patrice for reconnecting us to our food sources and reminding us just how special it is to live on this beautiful blue-green space flower that we call home.